Oh, hi, Mike.
Hello.
Did you hear me playing?
Sort of, except my audio was all messed up, so it was really quiet.
Good. I was trying to get some inputs, outputs nailed down, so I was over here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
No, I missed that. Unfortunately,
Good.
that would have been entertaining.
But you got me doing the repeat, so there you go. How's Mike today?
Pretty good. How's Joe today?
Good. I just launched the guild, so I'm happy.
Nice.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. It's one of those launch day, assume nobody will show up moments and hope that one person shows up.
Those are
That's the way it goes. I know. I hate launch days, but at the same time, I love launch days, so that's the way it goes. In other news, we have all kinds of follow-up to go through, Mike.
Yeah, I'm curious about your marketing strategies. Obviously, you went through this because you have implemented some of said marketing strategies.
I think I just landed on I need to be okay sharing things in a heavy way. And although I don't think I'm super good at that, I know that it's something I can continually get better at. And I think, part of the whole discourse expert thing that we've talked about in the past is that it's simply a mindset, and saying it out loud. It's similar to writers who say, I am a writer. Like, being able to admit that something is true about yourself changes the way that you view the thing itself and how you actually implement it. And in this particular case, I've got a couple things that I'm launching both today and tomorrow based on one round of code that I've written, and I need to be okay saying that it's really good code. And if I admit that, it allows me to market it in a very positive and genuine way. I think that's what I've landed on. I don't know if that makes any sense whatsoever. I'm not really sure what that means tactically, but it's helped me from a strategy standpoint somewhat, if that makes any sense whatsoever.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, you've come to peace with the fact that you are a marketer. Is that correct?
I think that's true. I think that's a good way to say it, is that I'm okay saying that I've made a thing that's amazing, and being willing to say that and know that that's true helps me promote it.
True, but I think that's a little bit different than the way I phrased it, because you could say, well, my thing is amazing, but I'm still not a marketer, so don't lump me in with all those other guys.
That's true. Well, I didn't mean to sidestep that one. I think that you are correct in saying that I know that this is a thing that I have struggled with in the past. And I think you're kind of in the same boat. We've talked about this before. We're promoting ourselves and saying that we've made a great thing is something that we don't necessarily see as second nature to us. It's something we definitely have to work on. And I'm coming to grips with that and saying that this is something that I know I can do and I should do and I want to be good at. And I'm learning that I am fairly good at it if I will simply do it. So I'm admitting that, yes, I'm a marketer, and I'm going to do it.
Nice.
There you go. That's what I got on that one.
All right. And then I've got a couple of them here. First on the list, know when to hold them and when to fold them. This is basically pertaining to the cognitive biases and when to recognize that they are impacting my decisions and when to be okay with that. I feel like I've done a fairly decent job with this. Of course, that has been helped by the fact that I haven't had much time to think the last couple of weeks. I just have a bunch of things that I need to get done. We're in the middle of doing a bunch of interviews. I think I mentioned that to you last time we recorded. I've got 19 interviews in this week and next week, which is basically all my time. And
Right.
the stuff doesn't stop because I'm doing the interviews either. There's still the dojo stuff. There's still the podcast stuff. So you add all that up, and I don't have a whole lot of time to waste on non-important decisions. So I've kind of resolved myself to the fact that, yeah, I'm going to have these cognitive biases, but I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of time trying to overcome them at this particular point. After next Friday, when my interviews are done, that probably changes a little bit. Then I go back to my ways of making things a bigger deal than they really are. But hopefully not.
Makes sense. Anytime you add like a little thing that can help you in the future, but it takes a lot of upfront work, it always adds a lot of extra stress during that time. It usually turns out way better in the end, but you kind of have to suffer a little bit to get there.
Yeah. By the way, one thing I did kind of notice on this whole topic of making decisions is that with certain people, we'll just use the example of like the going out to eat with your significant other. I think actually maybe even Josh mentioned this at some point too, where we've all been at that point where like you want to go somewhere. Where do you want to go? I don't know. Where do you want to go? Like that is incredibly stressful for me. That pushes all of my buttons. And that's a perfect example of this know when to hold them, when to fold them, because it doesn't really matter. Just get in the car and go somewhere.
I hate those conversations.
Yeah. So I've been thinking about this, and like this particular situation I use this because I think it's a very general example. I haven't applied this framework in this particular position, but I know it's going to work, and I've applied it a couple other places where if you need somebody else's input to make a decision, kind of forget the cognitive biases and just pick a couple of decent options and be like, which one do you want? You'll get to the bottom of it a lot quicker. And so that's been, like I said, the last couple of weeks, kind of a survival mechanism, but been my approach, I guess. I have not had to say I'd rather not. I haven't, and I guess I just haven't been asked to do something that hasn't been something that I've wanted to do. Like I said, I've been very, I hate using this term busy because I think it's way overused in society, but legitimately I have been busy on the right things. I'm making progress on the things that I need to make progress on, but I haven't had the opportunity to be distracted by the shiny objects, if that makes sense. And so that's where I can fall into the trap of saying yes to the things that I don't really want to do. Is like, well, technically I've got a little bit of time. I could squeeze this in. Like in the last couple of weeks, it's just been like, no, don't even ask. Like people know.
Just don't.
Like, just stay away until next Friday.
Go away. There's no way I could do it. Yeah, I understand.
Yeah. So again, like I did well on the next point. Did you make any decisions take longer than they should have? No, because I've had to make them as short as possible in order to keep my head above water. So
you didn't have the luxury of taking your time on them.
Exactly.
How'd you do on the no news except tech news thing?
Oh, I did great on this. Even the tech news, like there have been several. Okay, so usually throughout my day, whenever I have a little bit of a break, I will go on Twitter because I don't follow a ton of people, and I'll just see what's going on. Okay, it's a fairly habitual thing. It's not like I do it all the time. Maybe 4 or 5 times throughout the day. During lunch, that sort of thing, where I just want to take a little bit of a break. But I have noticed several times in the last couple of weeks that I haven't even looked at Twitter like the entire day. I'll open it when I'm done with work, and I'll see this huge number in my timeline, and just be like, oh my gosh, I'm not going through all this stuff, and then just close it again. So again, victory by necessity.
Yeah, so that's where the whole Twitter completionist thing actually helps you, because you think you have to go through all of them, so you freak out and don't do it at all. Is that fair? Is that what you're doing?
That is fair. Yeah. Now, I will also say though that the way I've used Twitter has changed over the years, and I've really pared it down where I don't follow a bunch of different tech people because I don't need 10 different versions of the same story. Let me look, see how many people I am actually following. Give me just a second.
Yeah, because I know there's only like 2, maybe 3 people or sites that I follow that give me like Apple or tech news in general. And it seems like across those 2 or 3, I catch pretty much everything, it seems, without having to follow, 15, 20, 100 people all tweeting about the same thing.
So I technically follow 175 people, and I say technically because there are a bunch of people on this list that I know in real life that have not tweeted in years. It's probably more like 100 tops. So yeah, it's more sustainable than it has been in the past. But yeah, I haven't really followed news. I did overhear a couple things yesterday and this morning, which were a little bit concerning. But yeah, I'll just leave it there.
Yeah. Dare I ask?
Yeah, I mean,
you want to just skip it and go on?
Well, no. This is not a politics podcast. It's generally not a religion podcast, although this is going to be an interesting episode, I think,
I got
for
a
a lot of
disclaimer
people.
for this one when we get there.
Yeah. So yeah, no news is good news, Joe.
Okay, good deal. Good deal. So we just alluded to it. So let's just jump in here. So the book for today, The Legend of the Monk and the Merchant by Terry Felber. And this is the last of the Dave Ramsey books, Mike. So listeners, you don't have to have me, just throwing another Dave Ramsey book on you. Sorry. But this one is one that to be honest with you, I put it on the list. And I think I mentioned this last time. I put it on the list. I didn't even look into it. I could not have told you what the premise of the book was before I picked it up. So this is a case of pure trust in somebody recommending a book. And I do this on occasion, Mike. I sometimes have people who recommend a book, and I don't know if I can trust their recommendations or not. So I will take their first one, read it, and if I enjoyed it, I tend to trust their opinions on book recommendations and pick them up if they recommend another. If I don't like it, I tend to ignore their recommendations. Just kind of how I work.
So people, you got one shot with Joe.
That's it. You got to get the first one and make it good. So this is a case of me trusting Dave Ramsey's book recommendations. And I put the disclaimer here that this is going to be an episode where I think it's impossible for us to discuss this book without bringing up God and the Bible a significant amount, since it's very biblically based. And since Mike and I both fall in the world of being Christians, I think it's impossible for us to talk about this without talking about our faith in likely a very strong way. So for the listeners, if all of that sounds like an absolute nightmare to you, feel free to turn this one off. But I think that's the route we're going to end up going on this one. Is that fair, Mike? Do you want to add to, subtract to from that disclaimer?
That is fair, but I would say that this book has a lot of value, even if you don't consider yourself a Christian, because it shatters a lot of the paradigms regarding the Christian view of success and, in particular, wealth.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. And I know that for me, I don't have a problem listening to folks from a different faith talk about it because I'm always interested in someone else's viewpoint. And although I may not agree with you, I am at least interested in your opinion on it. And to me, I know that as we go through this, there's a lot of good things that you can get from this, even if you don't believe the Bible or in God. And I would encourage you to listen to it because I'm sure there's some things that you can glean from it. And I don't think you have to, like as Mike is saying, I don't think you have to have faith in order to glean a lot of positive things from this.
Yeah, definitely. And it's not the type of book where they do have like scripture reference after scripture reference to validate what they are saying. It is a story. It is a narrative. But I think this is a very, very important book because we've all got our preconceived notions on how the world works. And regarding faith, and specifically Christianity, there is a very commonly held belief that if you are really going to be spiritual, then you must have nothing. You must be poor because that is the only way that God can speak to you. And that's the Mike Schmidt's version, but that's really what it boils down to. And you see in this story, you see some of that in some of the characters, but you also see the world through other perspectives. And the big takeaway from this is that you don't have to be, if you consider yourself a religious person, you don't have to be resigned to a life of suffering and poverty, that there are spiritual reasons why you are supposed to be successful. And I think that applies regardless of your belief system. I mean, most of the people that I know in the productivity space, whether they be Christian, whether they have another religious belief system, whether they are completely agnostic and don't believe in God at all, they believe that they are here for a specific purpose and that they have a specific role to play. And that is where this book can be a big help, because I think that really what it's speaking to is the fact that you're made to be successful. There are certain principles which will help you be successful. And then that success, like that is a good thing. And it's going to help other people. The more, I probably talk about the Asian deficiency core values way too much, so we won't belabor this point. But number one, glow green.
But
number
they're
two,
good.
Pull others up. They are good. I love them. But you get on an airplane and you have to. They always say you put your own oxygen mask on first before you help other people. Like you have to make sure that your own stuff is taken care of before you can help other people get to where you are. You can only take people as far as you've been. So. Yeah, I think there's a lot of value in this book for just about anybody, and it's really short too. It's a very easy read. I think I read this whole thing in one sitting.
Oh, nice. I love. We've talked about this before. I love it whenever people write books and they tell a story and then they debrief it. Like it seems like that's the way some of these books are going, and this one holds true to that, and it makes it very engaging. The story itself, I'm with you. I had a hard time putting it down. There's a lot of the study guide thing at the back that I felt like I was skimming. I'll just confess to that. But I do agree that it's interesting to go through the entire story. I didn't sit down and read it in one setting. Some of that had to do with my wife and I tend to have a number of conversations about money at this level. We have a number of folks that I don't want to say mentor, but we try to help, not financially, but with from an intellectual standpoint on money. And we try to encourage people with that. So we have conversations about this quite frequently. And as I was reading it, something would strike me or it would shed new light on something that we have discussed a number of times in an interesting way, and I would share it with her. Well, then that led to a 30, 45-minute, hour-long conversation, so I didn't finish reading it in one setting. Otherwise, I probably could have, but I tend to read with her on the other side of the room at night a lot of times, and yes, it leads to fun conversations whenever you can just share it with her. So it was a good time.
Yeah, I like the fact that you teased out there that I forget exactly how you put it, but basically you mentor other people when it comes to finances and stuff like that. And I think that that's great. I think that is missing for a lot of people. I know that my own life, like the times where I've been able to work with a coach or a mentor and they can share their own experience and say, hey, I tried this, it didn't work. I tried this, it does work. That can save you a lot of pain. And I think that when it comes to faith and Christianity specifically, like that would be called discipleship. I guess in the world, maybe it'd be called mentorship, but it's really, really important. It's so important that from a Christian perspective, that like that's the last thing that Jesus said is like, go and make disciples, help other people be successful.
Right.
And when you're talking about who you're going to let mentor you, you're only going, at least for me, I'm not going to take advice on how to raise a solid family from somebody who's been divorced 5 times. Like
or has no kids.
Look at the fruit. Exactly. Or, as it pertains to money, I'm not going to take financial advice from somebody who is living month to month above their means and is stressed out because they don't have enough money to pay their bills. Like, you may know what to do, but you're not actually doing it. So I can't really believe you when you say, oh, this is the thing that you have to do, because you haven't lived it out. Like, there's the chauffeur knowledge that we talked about last time, where you can spit the stuff back, but do you really believe it? My pastor says that the word that you believe is the word that you actually do. And I think that that's a really important key here, and why it's so important that this book becomes, well, I shouldn't say becomes, because it probably is pretty successful already. I mean, Dave Ramsey's giving it to everybody that works for him and stuff like that. But it's not the type of mindset that I've seen traditionally in the churches that I've been involved in. Now, the church that I'm involved with now, that this is very much in line with their belief system. But that was really shocking to me when I started going there. It's like, I had never heard this before. I grew up Catholic, and I always had that view of the monks or the priests. They were super spiritual. They were above everybody else, and they had taken this oath of poverty. Whether that's true or not, and I know that that's not true in a lot of cases, so I have to say that. But that was the perception I had. And right or not, that perception is fostered by the environment. And I think that the environment needs to change. And if just speaking to the Christian church in America specifically, because that's what I have experience with, if more people understood the concepts that are outlined in this book, there'd be a lot more people who would be running things and owning things, and they'd have their own businesses instead of working for somebody else. Not that that isn't necessarily a bad thing, but when you are called to do your own thing, that is a bad thing. One of the quotes I teased out is page 14, your vocation is your calling. It's the thing you were born to do. When you do it, it's not really work at all. There's a lot of people who are, quote unquote, forced to work. They're stuck in that thing that they don't really believe is the right thing, but they've also got this improper view of like, well, this is I'm just called to suffer in this particular job, or this is my lot in life, or even the one that really drives me crazy is, well, this is where I am until God opens another door or opens another window. And really, what this book is saying is that you can open your own doors, you can open your own windows. You just got to connect to your vocation, and you got to do the thing that you were created to do. You can't just sit around and wait for it to happen someday.
Well, that takes you to the first key, because the whole book is centered around 12 keys of successful living. And as the story goes on, the main character here, Antonio, he writes these principles down. He's being mentored by another merchant. And, you're talking about the first one here is work hard and God will prosper you. And there's a bit of a caveat that comes with that, because you have to work hard in the right way. You just working hard doesn't guarantee anything, but you have to work hard for the right reason. And that's where the second part of that first principle, God will prosper you, comes in. Now, I do want to back up a little bit, because the whole legend of the monk and the merchant that's told here, it really lays out the difference between those who teach the Bible and those who build businesses or work in the general marketplace. And those two we tend to confuse them as far as their roles go at least in the American society. And as we see that in a lot of areas, it seems like there are certain, like take a certain pastor at a church that I used to be at, and he would quite often have 2 or 3 services throughout the week, including Sunday morning, and would frequently get upset whenever people wouldn't show up for that because they had to work, or they were too tired, or, the litany of excuses that people can give for that. But the trick there is that just because the doors are open, that would tell me that those who are working in ministry in that way, that is their role. That's the choice that they've made. That is their vocation, if you will, to study the Word and share it with other people. On the flip side of that, there's the rest of us who don't do that as our main, but we work in the marketplace. We earn an income, and then it is our job to finance the vision of the people who are working in that ministry. So they minister to us. We drive the income that can then fulfill their vision, to which they then minister to us and new believers. So it's this nice balance that works between the two, but it's very easy to get them confused and to get upset at the one in the other area because you're not doing the thing that I'm doing that I feel called to. So they need to work in balance with each other.
Yeah, you just called out at the very beginning of the book the one thing I had issue with.
Okay.
All right. So a little bit of perspective. I mean, what you just described, the people who are at all those services, that is us. We are there Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night. We've got men's ministry that I'm the coordinator for, involved the worship team, so practice on Thursday nights as well. But I think that there is an important distinction here between people who are just going to blanket say, well, my role is in the marketplace, so you should be happy with whatever time I could squeeze in here. And people who are in the marketplace who are completely sold out for, I mean, there's really no way of beating around this one. Like, if you really confess that God is the most important thing to you, like that has to be reflected in all of your decisions. And what I see is that a lot of people justify, well, I'm not going to be at the house of God. I'm not going to be part of what God is doing because I have to work. And I think that's a convenient excuse. And I think that in this particular book, it's kind of takes place. It sounds like it's more old school analog, where the times have changed quite a bit. And what I see as people get more and more busy is more and more excuses not to be a part of that work. And that doesn't mean that you have to be at every single service, but it does mean that you have to be involved because, I mean, I've got a Bible college degree. Now, I have not gone to seminary, so I can't say that, like, I know all of this stuff, but this is my understanding of, like, Ephesians 4:13 talks about there are apostles, there are prophets, there are people who are set aside as the fivefold ministry, but it says that their work is to equip the saints for the work of the ministry. So the issue I have with this book is this view that, well, the monks are going to take care of the church and they're going to do all the spiritual stuff, and then the merchants are just going to come and they're going to give the money to fund the work. Like, I don't think that you can say that 100%. I think that there's a lot of gray area there, and it's going to be different for every single person, what that looks like, how it plays out in your particular sphere of influence and your particular situation. But I think it is very important, if you consider yourself a merchant, if you consider yourself a Christian, that you make sure that those priorities are always correct. And that's going to dictate what you're going to do. You're not going to just put in the minimum, I guess is the better way to say this, if you really do believe that God is first. Does that make sense?
It does. And the thing I want to call out here is that giving and helping fulfill the mission or the vision of, say, the ministers does not have to be financial. Yes. And in a lot of cases shouldn't be financial. I just had a conversation, yesterday as we're recording this, with a guy who is a financial advisor, and he talks about how certain millionaires that he helps, they often try to give to organizations that need it, but if the organization is one that receives a lot of donations and they seem to be on a good path, he doesn't necessarily see that that's a place to give because they already have the finances. And in those cases, if he wants to help them, he uses the fact that he is wealthy to set time aside to go volunteer and help them. And I think that's very similar to what, like, you and I do. We don't necessarily give large sums of money to the church in such a way that we can fulfill a huge vision, like add on to the building or start a whole new program. Like, we're probably not going to be able to do this unless you've got an inheritance. You're not telling me about Mike. But there's not there's not really that I for sure am not going to be one that can do that, at least at this point in life. And when I stop and think about how I give to the church and how I help fulfill that vision, it's one where I know my best path forward to help them is specifically from a tech standpoint. And I can do things with technology that a lot of people are confused by and think are magic. So I can take advantage of those skills and give back to the church. And those skills are things I've learned in the marketplace and that I've built in the marketplace. Yes, I can develop finances and work on driving a large income so that I can give back to those in the monk or the ministry world. But at the same time, I'm building other things other than wealth at the same point that can then be given back. Do you see the connection there?
I definitely do. The thing, I'm not trying to disagree, so I want to make sure I say this the right way.
No, you're fine.
I think what you just said, the way that you can contribute is through a tech angle. Like, that's really valuable, but I think that you also have to be careful that what you are contributing is actually what is needed.
Yes.
You could be really good at juggling kittens, and maybe that's not going to help the
Don't drop one.
pastor accomplish the vision of the church. Also, I think that if you did have large sums of money, you could be giving a ton of money. That's great. I mean, there are definitely people who have done that sort of thing, but that doesn't necessarily mean the fact that you have giving large chunks of money that you're fulfilling your mission either. I mean, there's a lot of philanthropists who give incredible amounts of money, but they're not, I would argue, fulfilling the spiritual duty that they have, and that's not necessarily their fault. Maybe they don't have the revelation of or they don't have that belief system. But I would say that can be the trap, is like, well, I've given a whole bunch of money and therefore I'm good. But I mean, Matthew 6:33 talks about where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And so I think that word treasure, that's the key. And it's not just financial, but it is also your time, your attention, your energy, your focus. Like, what is your dominant thought? Locate yourself. If you just show up once a week and you give a bunch of money, like, that's great, but that doesn't necessarily mean that your heart is in the right place.
Yes, but it's also very difficult to know where someone's heart is at the same time.
Exactly. I can't make that judgment. No pastor, priest, monk can make that judgment. You have to locate yourself. And that was kind of his point, I think, when he was talking about, like, he goes into the church and he sees the monk, like, giving him the hard stare because he's not in church enough or whatever. And he's just smiling. He's like, well, I'm giving a bunch of money. Like, I had a little bit of an issue with that particular part of the book, because I do think that, not in that particular situation, maybe in the story, that just kind of seemed like there was bitterness or resentment harbored towards the guy because he wasn't doing what the monk in this particular case thought he should be doing. But I do think that if you are going to attend a specific church, for example, you're going to call somebody pastor, then they do, recognizing that they do have a special gift and a special anointing for that role. You do have to accept and like, seriously evaluate what they tell you to do. You can't just make the blanket statement like, well, I know what's best, because I personally believe that if you are called to a specific church, for example, you're called a specific person who is pastor over you, they are anointed for you. They know things about you. God shows them things about your life that you need. And that's what makes the whole relationship work. That's what brings power to the church. If you don't have that, then I don't know. Like, I kind of view, like, where you end up being very, very important, because I think that it can't be something that you decide out of your own natural emotion. The church and I know that that's colored and tainted by I shouldn't say tainted, but it is definitely influenced by my own personal story, where the church that we go to at this point, probably not a story for this podcast, but at one point I said I will never set foot in that church, and funny enough, that's where we go to church now. So
that's the way it goes, isn't it?
Got a sense of humor. So I hope that makes sense, though. I really do believe that you don't just choose the church that you go to, that you are placed in the church that you go to, and you are placed there strategically, and you have gifts that complement the other gifts that are there, and also the things that lack there. And that's why people get frustrated in churches and leave, is because, well, this church doesn't have what I like. Well, that's why you're there. You're there to change that. You're there to complete the picture.
I agree with you. I think there's a lot of a disconnect in most churches, it seems, with folks who, say come from the marketplace. I'll use that term. And by that, I'm simply meaning folks who are not in the ministry from a technical standpoint. And then there's the other side of those who are in the ministry who are teaching. And there has to be a balance between following the leadership of the ministers of the church and supporting them both in skills and finances. So they teach you, you need to learn from them. And at the same time, if you can, and I would tend to argue that everyone can in some form or another, give back to the church. And again, it doesn't have to be finances, but at the same time, it should be to a point. So that it's very difficult to nail this down because we as humans like to try to come up with hard and fast rules. This one's one where I don't think there are any, because it just depends on the heart and the subculture, I guess, of that specific church and the people within it. Is that fair, Mike?
Yeah, I think the real takeaway from all of this is, and I'm going to look up the reference so I don't mess it up. I believe it's First Corinthians. So let me back up. 1 Corinthians 13, probably everybody, whether you are a Christian or not, has heard the verses quoted from this at weddings and things. It's the love chapter, okay? So one of the things that I've learned in my Bible college studies, because like I said, I have a degree from Word Bible College in Escondido, California. You have to look at things in context. Okay, so people look at that love chapter, but the chapter before that, chapter 12, this is where they're talking about one body with many members, and the ear can't say to the eye, I wish I was an eye, or the hand can't say to the foot, other way around. Like, everybody's got a specific role to play. And the quicker we are okay with the role that we have, and we're not just looking for a bunch of other eyes to hang around with, and we embrace our role in building this body, like, the better off the church is going to be.
Yes, I agree. This kind of ties into, or do you want to expand on that, Mike?
No. You're segueing into the second point, which is actually what I was going to do. But I will say that point number 1, work hard and God will prosper you. As the author of a book called Thou Shalt Hustle, I completely agree.
Link in the show notes. So this ties into the second key that's mentioned in the book. Financial prosperity is often connected to soul prosperity. And I think this dovetails in quite nicely with what we're talking about, because you really have to be open to being taught and growing spiritually before you can develop the intellect and the knowledge that can then drive financial prosperity. And this likely ties into bookworm to an extent, Mike, because so much of what we do with the books that we're reading is gaining knowledge and learning about a variety of topics that eventually tie back into how we go about reaching other people, either through helping with technology or productivity in our case, or developing a stronger faith in Christ. And as we continue to learn about that, it's interesting how it then plays back into the first key of working hard and God will prosper you. Those tend to be very closely interconnected.
Yeah, so this is really interesting because most people think of prosperity as money. One of the things that I picked up from reading The Art of Exceptional Living by Jim Rohn, and it's actually not even a physical book, it is an audiobook when I got it off of Amazon. he has a quote in there where he says, "Work harder on yourself than you do on your job." And I think that is speaking directly to this point where prosperity actually occurs in a lot of different arenas. In the Bible college that I went to, they talk about the 5 different levels of prosperity. And so at this point, I suppose people have either tuned out or they're really jacked about the angle that this episode is going. So I'll just unload.
Just go for it.
All right. So first you've got spiritual prosperity. That would be when you have the revelation and you've accepted Christ, like you are saved. And then from there, there's other levels along the way. There is mental or emotional prosperity. There is physical prosperity, because the Word of God, if you believe that it is the Word of God, if you believe that the Bible is the Word of God, there are answers for every area of life in there. And so as you develop this relationship and as you study that Word and apply those principles, you will see the prosperity in the other levels. Another level is relational. So your relationships will get better if you're doing things the right way. I 100% believe that. And that is a spiritual principle, not just a, how do I say this? Well, I guess worldly principle, but that's a Christianese term. I don't like to use that because if you're not familiar with that term, it seems like us against them. It's not what I want to make it sound like at all. But kind of the differentiation that this book is making is that there's like the church stuff and the non-church stuff. So there's a lot of non-church stuff, especially in the productivity space, which is based off of, I personally believe, in the Word of God. And that's what got me down the path of writing my book. And then lastly is financial. Like that's the last one that you typically see the manifestation of this prosperity, but that's the one that people look for. And so if you're just looking for the financial prosperity, you can miss all of the growth that's happening in all of the other areas and all the other ways that you are being prospered. Brandon Wentland did a dojo module on journaling, and he talked about the gap versus basically it's like a gap versus growth. I think he used a different term. But what journaling does is it locates you. And if you don't journal, for example, you look at where you want to be and where you are now, and all you see is the gap. You see, oh man, I wanted to have this. I wanted to be making this. I wanted to be able to do this. I wanted to have this time freedom, whatever. I don't have that. And you can quickly get discouraged. But when you journal, instead of your reference point being where you want to be, your reference point is where you were. And when you look at where you were and you see that growth, that is actually very encouraging, and that creates a sustainable momentum to keep moving towards that ideal future.
Got Mike excited.
Kind of my thing. So I like the opportunity to talk about this stuff. So
I don't know if I should say you're welcome, Bookworm listeners, or I'm sorry. Here you go.
Let us know if you hate excited Mike, then let us know that. No, just kidding.
So I love the concept of having prosperity in a lot of different arenas, because it's easy to think of the traditional term of prosperity. We immediately stereotype it with finances. Like, oh, he's very prosperous. He's made a lot of money. He's very successful. He's made a lot of money. Like, we tend to just interchange those terms quite a bit. So I love seeing that the term is being used in other ways. So again, it comes back to this key of financial prosperity is often connected to soul prosperity. So it doesn't necessarily, I mean, you see it is often connected to, that doesn't guarantee it. And I think that's what you're getting at there, Mike.
Exactly. And also the place that you give financial prosperity in the order of importance, the priority, the hierarchy, that will determine whether you experience the prosperity in these other levels. Because there are a lot of people, for example, in the Asian efficiency community, in the productivity community, you hear all these stories about people who on the surface are very successful. They've got a lot of money, but they are miserable. In fact, I'm thinking of one thing in particular. There was the Planet of the Apps, which is the show that Apple launched as part of Apple Music, but it's a TV show, which is confusing. But they had this banner ad that they got in trouble for because they showed this guy's picture and they took out one phrase from the episode, and this really wasn't the point that he was making, but this is what they chose, and it was something along the lines of, I haven't seen my family for over 3 weeks or something like that. And it was all because it's a banner ad. It's like they're they're advertising and they're lifting this thing up as like, well, this is just the price you got to pay for success. And there was a lot of legitimate, and I'm glad there was backlash against that, because that's not right. And in that particular case, yeah, maybe your app makes it big, but you've been burning the candle at both ends. You haven't seen the people who are most important to you. Maybe you've made a lot of money, and a lot of people, they make the money, and then they look back and they say, oh man, that was pointless. That was worthless, according to Ecclesiastes. What was the point of all of that? Because I lost the stuff that was really important.
At one point I did some research on what do a lot of people see as their biggest regrets as they're on their deathbed? Like what are these things that people wish they had done or were glad that they did whenever they know that their life is coming to an end? And it's a bit morbid to think about this sort of thing, and it's kind of a challenge to read some of this stuff. But hands down, the thing that people talk about the most is building relationships and helping other people. That seems to be far and away the number one thing that people either wish they had done or they were glad that they did. And to me, that should be the definition of prosperity, is have you helped other people in a strong way, and have you been able to build relationships in a very encouraging way, which is seen through this entire book, because it's a grandfather teaching these keys to successful living to his grandson. You don't really get more true to form than that. So it's something that this book, even from kind of a meta level, just in how the story is told, explains that principle in itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Another kind of principle that is throughout this book, based on the relationship that you just pointed out, is the third key, which is a man must do whatever he can to provide for his family, not just his immediate family in this particular case, but it's the grandfather who's teaching these things to the grandson. I really like that, because I think we can narrowly define family, and I'm not just talking like extended family. So let's just use, there's a term called the church family, where let's say that you attend a specific church, and the people that are there can benefit from what you have to give them. Like, you can't just say, no, I got to take care of my own stuff. Like, you do have a responsibility if you're going to call yourself a part of that church family. And I think that word family is really important, because we can look at it and say, well, that's somebody else's responsibility. But that's the improper view of this. The best way to do this is not to come to church, for example, or even to a family, any sort of family meeting. I think that this principle still applies. Like, if you come and you are looking for what you can get, you're making withdrawals from those emotional bank accounts that Stephen Covey talks about. That's not going to end well for you. But if you are coming looking for what you can give, that flips the script, gets your eyes off of your own problems, and oftentimes you will find that your problems are solved by you looking to solve the problems of other people. I think that is super important, but then specifically pertaining to this number three, a man must do whatever he can to provide for his family. The other obvious point here is that sometimes you got to do what you got to do. And it's not always going to be convenient, but you have a responsibility. You cannot just say, well, I'm not passionate about that. Like, go get a job. If your family is having trouble eating, you need to find a way to support them.
I have all kinds of thoughts on this. It's going to get crazy political if I go there, so I'm going to skip some of it.
Yeah, well, I guess the non-political version is just this, that sometimes you have to do things that are not ideal. Sometimes you have to do things that you don't really want to do, but you do them because you have to pay the bills. You have to keep the lights on. You have mouths that you have to feed. And that's okay. And it's part of the process, and it's not forever. Like, just buckle up and do it. It's a season. Winston Churchill said, if you're going through hell, keep going. Just don't stop there. And don't just sit and wait for, someday the perfect door, the perfect opportunity is going to open. You make your own luck by doing the things that nobody else will do.
Yes. And this ties into the fourth key. Trials develop your character, preparing you for increased blessings. So whenever bad things happen, I guess that ties into number 5 too. When bad things happen, don't just sit on your hind end and just worry about it. Like, get up and do something. Like, this is to help make you better. I tend to refer to some of my early jobs as some of my first character building experiences. It's like, okay, these were not easy jobs to be in. They were not fun. I did not like them, but they built a lot of character and taught me a lot, which has brought me to where I'm at today. So I wouldn't trade those. They were not fun, but it has prepared me for better things, and I'm very grateful for that. But you have to be willing to see it that way and not get upset whenever a bad thing comes along. You have to be willing to see it the right way. And as per the fifth key here, take responsibility for problems that are a result of your own bad decisions. Don't displace the blame. And we can get into this one a little bit more too, but you have to be willing to take responsibility for something that happened, a trial that's come along. It may not be your fault, but you can take responsibility for it.
Yeah. There's a couple things here which are really important, and I the whole point of this book, I guess, is it gives you these 12 keys to successful living. There, I'm sure, have been books written on each one of these different keys.
Oh, so, easy, yeah.
We're kind of going over them fairly quickly, but the trials specifically. Let me speak to this one first. Trials. Number 4, trials develop your character, preparing you for the increased blessings. Doesn't matter the source of the trial, like you were saying. Like, it may or may not be your fault. You cannot change that now, but you can change how you are going to deal with this thing, and you can determine that I'm going to have the grit, I'm going to have the perseverance to see this thing through, and I'm going to learn from this experience so that it doesn't happen again, and I can avoid this negative situation. That's a very, very important mindset for people to develop, because if you have the other side of that, the other thing you could do is like, oh, woe is me, this is completely unfair, I shouldn't be in this particular place. All of those things can be 100% true, but how does that help you? How does that change your situation? How does that make anything better? That's the real key here, is looking for the way to improve the situation, looking for the way to solve this problem, looking for the way to get out of this particular trial. And I think that the reason that prepares you for the increased blessing is that those things, they add to your experience, and then next time you're not going to be so gullible, you're not going to fall for those things. Okay? Like I said, whether it's your fault or not, you can see the warning signs a million miles away, and you can avoid that thing if you don't want to do it. Then the other thing here, the taking responsibility, this, like I said, it's kind of related, because you may not have been the one who originated the situation that you're in, but you are the one that can change it. And so taking responsibility is not saying that, oh yeah, this is completely my fault, but what I do from this point forward, that is completely my fault. If I just continue to accept that this is the normal state of being, then yes, that is my fault. However, why don't I try and change some things? Because who knows what could happen here. And a lot of the success stories that you read, especially in the types of books that we read for Bookworm, and if you study the authors, like a lot of them have their own personal story where everything was going wrong. They were sleeping on the couch in their friend's basement, and then they found the thing that worked, and then they completely changed their life. Well, that's the tipping point right there, is they found the thing that worked, but you can't find the thing that worked if you're not looking to change. If you are not looking to improve your situation, you will not discover that thing that worked, and you'll be stuck living on the couch in your friend's basement forever. And that's the thing that really irks me, I guess, is the acceptance of those situations as like, this is the way it's always going to be. Because I know, whether you have a Christian belief system or not, that these spiritual principles apply, and that energy or motion attracts energy. And as soon as you make any sort of motion, take that first step, just that first step towards changing your situation, a lot of things will fall into place that you never could have predicted.
And I think this can play into the second half of the next key. Don't displace the blame for, in this case, for problems, or as we've been talking about, trials. So often we see things where something really bad happened, and the two questions that normally come up are, one, why would God do this? or 2, the devil's out to get me. Like there's usually one of those two things, but it takes a bit of honesty with yourself to look at the situation and potentially see that this is your own bad decision that led you to it. The story in the book, you talk about Antonio. He had built a facility for creating these Venetian trading beads, and he essentially had too many furnaces going underneath the building, and it ended up catching on fire, and the whole thing burnt down. That's what led to the learning of this principle. And because of the situation and because it was so emotional, Antonio struggled to see that it was his own fault in that case, because he had too much going on. And when it first happened, he was asking, well, why would God do this? And some of his workers were doing the opposite, saying the devil's out to get us. Like they were going through this whole thing. Well, then Alicio, who is Antonio's mentor through this, and I guess I'm destroying some of the book here. Sorry, spoiler alert. After the fact, sorry about that. But Alicio takes him through the process of seeing that you had a lot of furnaces under a wood ceiling. That's always going to result in bad things at some point. This is your own decision to lead to this. Don't displace the blame and put it on God or the devil. This was yours in this case. And I really don't like this one, Mike, because I think I tend to fall into one of those two on occasion, not always, and maybe not even most of the time, but on occasion I know that that's my gut reaction, is to fall into one of those, because I don't want to admit that I've potentially made a bad decision. I don't think any of us really wants to do that, but being willing to take the blame for something, take responsibility for it, I think there's a lot of value in that, of course. But it's not easy to do.
No, it's definitely not easy to do. I think it's Genesis 8:22 talks about seed time and harvest. As long as the earth remains, these will exist, and that is basically cause and effect. And I like the story in the book that you brought up, because a lot of times what we get, the results that we see, are literally cause and effect. We are where we are today because of the decisions that we made yesterday. You are a product of your routine and your habits. But if you don't have the proper perspective, you can't see this stuff. And so while I'm going to mess up the names, Antonio was the grandfather. Yeah. So
yes.
He probably should have known that you throw a bunch of extra furnaces in a wood building, it's going to get really hot. Eventually there's going to be a fire. Like,
yes,
that's not, you don't need to be a rocket scientist to understand that. But in the moment, like you said, it's completely out of left field. How in the world is this? Why is this happening to me? I never could have seen this coming. Well, yes, you could have, if you would have understood the situation correctly.
Lots of hot burning things and wood. It doesn't go well.
Yeah, and a lot of times, all it takes whenever we feel that way is a mentor or somebody who can correct our perspective. And they don't have to be like, you idiot, what were you doing with all those furnaces in a wood building? All they have to do is say one thing, and it shifts the perspective, and then you're like, oh yeah, I guess I should have seen that. And that's an important part of the process too, I believe, though, because another thing that I teased out from point number 1 was that God only blesses what we actually put our hands to. In my book, I said that God will only delegate what you are able to administrate. Like if you just sit on what he's given you and what he's got for you to do, then why should he give you more? But when you have a misstep and the furnaces that you've built, the warehouses or whatever that you've built, they go up in smoke, that's not the end. Like the fact that you failed once doesn't mean that your whole life is a failure. And anybody that I know who has done something great has had missteps like that along the way. And sometimes it's just a little bump in the road because I tried this thing and it didn't really work out. Sometimes they really believe this is the thing and they sink their life savings into it only to find out that they've misjudged the market or whatever, you know? But recognizing that this cause and effect system, like this is at work in unpacking all of the circumstances and all of the results and figuring out the root causes is extremely valuable.
And this also, I'm kind of doing tons of segues here, but 4, 5, and 6, trials develop character, taking responsibility for problems, and then see challenges as stepping stones, not as obstacles. These all 3 came out fairly quickly, if not all at the same time in the book, all over that one incident of the warehouse, not warehouse, but the plant basically burning down. Along with some of his boats, actually, which was a problem, considering that's how they got things to different places. But Alessio helped Antonio see that the plant burning down may have been, and in this case it was, his fault for putting too much fire underneath the wood roof. But he helped them also see at the same time that although that trial wasn't fun, or it wasn't going to be an easy challenge, it was something to see it as a stepping stone and not as something blocking him from doing something better. Because Antonio was considering dropping business altogether and going back to the monastery as a result of this, as opposed to seeing it as a chance to build a better manufacturing plant and grow from it.
And I know lots of people who have made that emotional rash decision is like, well, that obviously didn't work, or God didn't obviously want me to do that. Well, no, you idiot. It's not that. It's that you messed up. And it's all part of the process. Like, I think that's the important distinction here, is that the challenges as stepping stones, not as obstacles, that is in the value judgment that you associate with them. So an obstacle, you view it as like, this is something that I absolutely need to overcome. It's unnecessary. It would be better if it wasn't here. But a stepping stone, it's almost like this is a necessary step in the process, which is going to get me to the point where I want to be. And I guess this is kind of getting into some of the Stoicism stuff, the Ryan Holiday stuff, but not making that value judgment of, oh, this thing is great, or, oh, this thing is terrible, is really important, because if you ascribe the value judgment to it, as soon as you say that, oh, this is a negative thing, you think that you shouldn't have to deal with this. And when you think that you shouldn't have to deal with it, you resent the fact that you do have to deal with it, and you can completely miss the lesson or the takeaway from that particular situation. And then that's not to say that God burned down Antonio's factories, but there is value that from the event, that there is something that you can learn from it. I guess that's the big takeaway for me, is always be looking for those lessons that you can learn, and that will help you avoid situations like that in the future if you don't want to experience the thing, but not being resentful of the process itself.
As people who, as entrepreneurs who are always coming up with new ideas and trying to develop new things, especially if you're in the world of development, you're going to run across things that just destroy what you have built very quickly, because it's not uncommon to build something and then have someone else build a competitor right away to try to beat you out. And you have to be okay with that, or know that it's going to be there, and not see it as something that is there to cause pain for you, but at the same time, it's something to help make you better. I'm trying to think, who is it? Gazelle? They do they'll buy your phone back from you. Actually, that's where I sold my old MacBook Pro. But they buy that stuff back. Well, there have been a number of programs that come out from even Apple themselves where they will do a lot of the same thing. Gazelle welcomed that and saw it as a way to get better, and saw it as a way to continue to deliver a better service to their customers. They didn't see it as competition. They saw it as a way to help more people and to make the offering even better. I think that's the way we need to come at this, is not worrying about it, but seeing it as a good thing, which is not easy, like we've been saying.
Yeah, I would say that it's not even viewing it as a good thing, but just recognizing that it is, and can't change the fact that it's happened. Where do you go from here? If you constantly are looking forward instead of backward, you won't get upset about all the missteps that you took.
Agreed. Now, this leads us into the next key here. Be meek before God, but bold before men.
This is my favorite chapter. This is where Antonio meets the pirate.
I'll let you introduce it then.
Basically, the point here is that as it pertains to your standing before God, you always have to make sure that you recognize the fact that you are not God. That's how I interpret this. You will always not be God, and you can try to make yourself God. It's not going to change the fact that you are not. And so recognizing that, accepting your place, and approaching God in the right mindset, the right reverence, like that is going to be very, very determinant of what you actually get when you spend time reading your Bible, praying, etc. Like that's going to be important, that you are meek, teachable. I guess the best way to describe this is like Julio, for example, in this story. He's not trying to interject with all the things that he's learned. Like he's just taking in what his grandfather is teaching him. He's learning from his own experience because his grandfather knows more than he does. Okay. Now, being bold before men, though, you kind of have to flip a switch. And this is not to say that you are thinking of yourself better than other people, which is, I think, probably the common manifestation of this mindset. But it is being confident in your abilities and in your rights before other people. So in the story, for example, this pirate contacts him, and he's kind of a bad dude, and he says, I want to have a meeting. And so he's kind of scared of this guy, doesn't want to go. Turns out he ends up going, and then gets a big business deal out of it.
Yes.
And that just
very big business
and that's
deal,
like
actually.
What he had to do, though, was he had to overcome his emotion and his fear. Okay, so that is something that everybody deals with, and that's also why I think something like Toastmasters is so important, because the number one fear that people have is public speaking. Number two is death. Okay, so people are more afraid of getting up in front of people and talking than they are about dying themselves, which is kind of messed up. But it comes back to this being bold before men. Most people, they think that they get in that situation, they've got nothing to say. Like, what can I possibly add to these people? And I've experienced this in my own very brief, very young public speaking career. Like, I have not appeared before large audiences, but even the audiences that I have spoken in front of, I suffer from that. I'm like, well, this person is here. This person is here. Like, why are they here to listen to me? But if you understand that you do have something of value, that can translate into the confidence to go before those people. So this is something literally that I'm dealing with right now, because I'm trying to get more experience, more visibility. So I'm reaching out to other podcasts, and the standard email that you get from people who want to be on podcasts is usually very self-serving, like, hey, I'd be great for your podcast. We get these all the time for the productivity show. Most of the time they're addressed to Tan, even though Tan's not on the podcast very much. So right away, when they say, hi, Tan, you know that they've never listened to an episode. Secondly, with the productivity show, we typically focus on specific problems from the dojo. And so people will come in and they'll say, hey, I've got a great guest for your show. And I'm just like, you don't listen because we don't really have guests for our show. And then they go on to talk about how great their guest is. Like, that's what I don't want to come across as. So this is really difficult for me because I have to frame this in a way, especially in a template, where maybe I've listened to the podcast, maybe I haven't, but communicating in a way that I'm confident in the message and the value that I can bring to their audience feels really internet markety to me. Going back to your initial point, your initial follow-up item, like in our discussion about the cognitive biases and how those pertain to marketing. This can be very difficult, but it's important because you have something of value to add to the conversation. So recognizing that is important, but then also not overstepping your bounds. That's really the key to this point, I think, is the balance.
And that's not an easy balance to find, because, and you might not have had a chance to listen to the latest theoretical, because Josh and I talked about the art of thinking clearly a little bit, and how it is okay to use some of those biases when you're marketing, but you have to do it in a way that will help the other person. Like, you have to have their best interest in mind. If you don't, then it's coming across as the scummy internet marketing thing that you're getting at. But if you're genuinely trying to help, it's okay to use some of those in that way. And it is really hard to find that balance. But at the same time, like you're saying, breaking that fear in a way that helps you help other people, if you can make that connection, that's the goal and the purpose behind this key. Is that a fair way to describe that, Mike?
Yeah, I think so. In the study guide thing at the end, they actually, one of the sections talk about the acronym FEAR, which can be applied a lot of different ways. But the one that I liked that they used was false evidence appearing real. As it pertains to my personality, and I will say false humility, the tendency can be to say that, well, I don't have anything of value. I don't have anything to contribute. I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to sit here and watch. And I would argue, and this is something that I struggle with and deal with on a daily basis, that is wrong. Like, you do have something that you need to contribute. You do have something that you need to add. You do have something valuable. There is a vocation. There is a need that you are specifically designed and created to meet. And if you do not do it, we all suffer.
Yes, agreed. Now, I want to move on to the number 8, because I'm also looking at the clock and we got to move.
The next 3 we could probably lump together. They all have to do with money.
Or the next 4, maybe?
Yeah, possibly.
All right, so let's do this. We're going to lump the next 4 together. So number 8, live debt-free and below your means. Number 9, always keep to your budget.
Those two for sure could be lumped together.
Yeah, it implies you have a budget to begin with there. Number 10, loaning money destroys relationships. Number 11, set aside the first 10% to honor God. And this all comes around the idea of, what do you do with your money after you have earned it in some way? Mm-hmm. And if you try to lump all of these together, what you tend to see is, 1, you need to create a budget. So in other words, decide what your money is going to do before you've done anything with it. So deciding where I'm going to spend the money that I'm earning before I've actually gotten to that point, if you follow me there. Once you've got that budget, decide that the first 10% is going to go to God, to the church in this case. Make sure that whenever you're building that budget, your income is greater than your outgo. You want to make sure that you're on the positive, not in the red. If you're in the red, that's a problem. And then at the same time, once you've got all of that decided, do not loan money to other people, because it will destroy those relationships. And if you ever listen to the Dave Ramsey show, one of the number one things that people struggle with is, mom and dad lent me money and I'm trying to pay them back, or my kids need to buy a car and I want to give them the money, like loan it to them. And most of the time, the complaints that come with that is that this is destroying our relationship and it is causing a lot of problems within the family. So if you ever want encouragement to not loan money to other people, just listen to that show. It'll set you straight pretty quick.
Yeah, and in the book, they at the very beginning, they stop at this restaurant where it's clear that Antonio knows the owner, and they basically get like a really good meal. And then later on in the book, you find out that the owner of that restaurant is actually a family member that he refused to loan money to.
Yes.
Which I thought was a little bit of a sensationalized example.
Yeah.
But I get the principle, and you are 100% correct that you do not want to be owing money to other family members, because it causes stress on the relationships. Now, I do think it's worth pointing out here that loaning money destroys the relationships, as point number 10 says. Giving money is a little bit different. Now, some of the same principles still apply, that when someone comes and asks you for money, you don't just whip out the checkbook and meet the need. I mean, if you're able to do that and you want to do that, that's awesome. But even that can be enabling in some senses. So really the point that he's making in this book is that you want to stay away from those things because you're not really helping that person. You're the easy button in that particular situation. And if you enable them, chances are they're never going to figure this out for themselves. And so there's going to be failure. And now there's going to be the added stress that they owe you money. And I completely agree that you should you should avoid that whenever possible.
I forget where I've heard it, but I've heard the phrase that if you loan somebody in your family money, Thanksgiving dinner doesn't taste the same. Like
that's a Dave Ramsey
changes
thing for
it.
sure.
Is that where I got that? Okay, I wasn't sure.
Yep.
Apparently, I'm a Dave Ramsey fan, as you can tell.
Well, these 4 points right here explain why he recommends this book.
Yes. And if you go through the study guide, you see Dave Ramsey mentioned a lot when they're going through that area of it.
There's a lot of good stuff here, though. And these are things that you read them and you're like, well, yeah, I know that. But do you? I mean, do you actually keep a budget? And if you do you actually spend less than you make? Like, it's very common sense, but common sense isn't so common. Like, you have to look at the actions. You have to match that up. Well, and that's really what you believe. You know, it's not the fact that you know that you're supposed to do a budget. It's not the fact that you know you're supposed to live below your means and have some savings for when things go wrong. But all of this stuff, like, is compounded. We're talking about the factory fire, for example. Like, that was the result of some choices. One of the things that Dave says in the Financial Peace University class that he does is the rain falls on the just and the unjust. And really what that means is that there is going to be some crisis. It is unavoidable. But most people don't look for the crisis. They don't look at the fact that, for the last 5 years, things have been going pretty well. I guess I should be ready for that rainy day for when things are going to go wrong. And they don't. They live paycheck to paycheck. And then the car blows up and you need a new one. And you're like, I don't have the money. Like, suddenly never comes suddenly. And you should be expecting these things and you should be building those into your budget. And if you do that on a consistent basis, it makes the times that those things happen much, much easier to deal with.
Agree, 100%. So there's a lot here because so much of this is how to manage money in a, to use the cliche term, prosperous way. And it's just not normal. Like, it's just not. And whenever you think about, take the first one here, live debt-free and below your means. How many people actually do that? And how many people use a credit card to buy something? Like, I'll just put that on the card. Like, I don't have anything against a credit card per se, but when you're using it to buy things you can't afford, that's a problem. And it will eventually expand to the point that it leads people to very inappropriate ways of managing money. I've heard stories of people who they get a new credit card and they don't think they ever have to pay it back. They think it's their money. They don't realize it's a credit card. It is a loan. You have to pay that back. The number of people who actually think that astounds me. And I can't help but wonder how they got to that point. And it makes me wonder if parents at some point have just said, I'll just put that on the card, knowing that they're going to pay it off later, but the kids don't see that part. They don't see the paying it back part. They just see, I'll just put it on the card. And I wonder if people get to a point where they just see it as, this is my money because I can just put it on the card. Why? What do you mean I have to pay it back? I just wonder how people get to that point. All this to say, don't go negative. Like, be intentional with it. And if you earn a certain amount of money, make sure that your expenses are less than that.
Yeah, there is a cognitive bias that speaks to this specifically, but I can't find it in my list of 100 from the last episode. I'll just summarizing what it says is that we tend to discount things that are in the future. And so that's why, if you listen to Dave Ramsey, he always recommends that you pay cash for stuff, because when you pay cash for things, you feel the pain of the money leaving your account at that exact moment. and you lose that as soon as you use a credit card. And he, by the way, he backs this up because I tried to sign up for the Entree Leadership Conference, and they would not take a credit card. It caused some problems, actually, but I was able to figure it out. But because I don't really use a debit card, I use the Amazon credit card just because I don't have to think about it. It's auto paid every single month, and I go into Amazon and I've got a bunch of points that I can use. So very, very simple system with a little bit of benefit. We always pay off the entire balance every single month. It's not an issue. But it was an issue when I tried to buy something from Dave Ramsey. So he lives what he preaches, regardless of what you think of him. The other thing I think is worth calling out here is this: set aside the first 10% to honor God. Now, I am going to hold back a little bit here because I know that my views on this are probably not the majority, I'll just say. But I really think that this is critical. I believe that if you do not set aside the first 10%, so that's like 10% of the gross, not the net, if you are going to abide by this system and say, yes, I am a tither, because that's what tithe means, 10%, it is critical that it is the first 10%, because that's what activates all of the other systems that God has set into place. And I know story after story after story after story after story of people who have just started doing this just as a way of testing God. You know, most people are thinking, oh, you can't test God. Actually, in Malachi 3, that's the only place where it says, test me in this, if I will not open the windows of heaven for you. And I can tell you from personal experience that our income has gone up year after year after year when we have implemented this system, this setting aside the first 10%. And lots of other people that I know have experienced this as well. Great book on this particular topic, by the way, is The Blessed Life by Robert Morris, which I believe is another Dave Ramsey recommendation. But it really gets into this whole financial system concept because, like I said, there's a lot of this stuff that if you're going to make the distinction church, not church, there's a lot of stuff that exists outside the church, which is actually Christian biblical principles being played out in the world around us. And this one right here is very critical. And I think it kind of ties into the last part here. Understand the power of partnership, because what you are saying when you agree to tithe and do things God's way is, yes, God, your system is better than any system I can come up with, which is probably a fairly safe statement to say. I mean, if you really wanted to get into that, Isaiah, I believe it's 55, says, your ways are higher than our ways, your thoughts are higher than our thoughts. Like, God sees things you don't see. He sees all of the opportunities that are out there in the future that you cannot predict. And if you are in the will of God, if you are doing things according to the system of God, then that opens up a lot of doors that, not that God doesn't want to bless his people, but he just can't because you haven't completely trusted him. I know that, like, if I want to bless my kids, for example, not that any sort of reward is based on what they do, but who they are. The amount of blessing that I can give them, whether that be financial, emotional, relational, whatever, like, it requires a response from them. If they are stone cold teenagers who, hey, whatever, you know, like that's going to limit what I'm able to do for them. And I think that that's honestly where a lot of parents get into trouble, because they get into those years and they don't see the response and they try to overcompensate from their end, and you can enable a lot of bad habits that way. But I think that this is really, really important, because when you make one step to show that, yes, God, I am in, I'm going to do things the way that you think they should be done, because I know that you're a lot smarter and better at this than I am, that puts the wheels in motion for a lot of different things.
I know that whenever I look at this key, understand the power of partnership, one of the first things I tend to think of is something we talked about early on in this conversation is building those relationships and doing mentoring. And it really comes through in the book with Alicio mentoring Antonio and seeing how he helps him learn these principles and do something with them. But the story that comes out at the end that really ties a lot of this together, you know, you mentioned the part where one of the priests was scowling at Antonio or Alicio. It happened to both of them, and they both smile back. in Alicio's case, he's smiling back because the priest doesn't necessarily understand how much he's doing and what he is doing at St. Peter's, because Alicio helped take the old cathedral down and started helping to build from a financial and a how do you explain that? From an intellectual standpoint, he was using his knowledge and expertise to help build the new. That was the partnership he was working on, but the priest that was scowling on him didn't know that, likely. So he's getting upset, but for the wrong reason in that case. He didn't fully understand it in that case. So I thought it was interesting that this comes out at the end because it ties so much of all the other keys together, and you don't really see it until the end. So I thought it was interesting that Alicio had this partnership with the monks, as per the story, and was able to help fulfill their vision in a lot of ways. And only part of it really was financial. Even though it was a huge financial burden to do that, it wasn't a big deal for him because he had built a massive empire of trade. So I love that it all comes together in this power of partnership, because the two sides are definitely not against each other. They are definitely interconnected. And when we finally see how to do that and fulfill it on both sides together, there's a lot of amazing things that can happen with that.
Yeah, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And that's why the partnership piece is so important. And also the perspective that I mentioned earlier, like instead of looking for what you can get, also looking at what you can give. If you approached all of the relationships, business relationships, whatever, that way, then you're going to have a lot more fruit from it because you've got this partnership where everybody is working together, and what you can build together when you are really in alignment is significantly more than anything that you could do by yourself. And that can be business. So if you are working in a real partnership where this is really a win-win, then financially maybe is the way that you experience the growth that way. But I also think we touched at this at the very beginning, the mentorship piece, like you just mentioned, the discipleship model, like this is important. If we are partners of the gospel, which is what it says in the Bible, then we need to embrace this partnership mindset, and we need to go and we need to find those people that we can mentor. Just think, like Alicio mentored Antonio mentored Julio, or I guess he probably mentored Filippo at some point, or Alicio mentored. No, okay, I'm messing this up. There's Alicio, who's the main guy. He mentored Antonio. Antonio's father was Filippo. He was the monk, and then Julio is the grandson. But just in this story, like we've got a lot more potential for the mentorship to happen. Like, what if Alicio had mentored more people than just Antonio? What if Antonio had mentored Filippo mentored Julio, and all of the people that that were in their sphere of influence? Like, imagine, I guess the thing that gets me excited about this is just thinking about the people who are in my church. My church is not a big church. It's roughly 150 people. But if I am able to communicate and mentor, in a sense, the things that I understand as it pertains to this particular area, as it pertains to this particular book, and I'm able to get even a handful of people who start their own businesses, and it becomes successful, and it completely changes their life, and then they go and they find 5 more people. Like, within one generation now, we've gone from 1 to 5 to 25. And I think that gets lost in the translation of this particular book because it's so focused on that one relationship, but there is exponentially greater potential impact through the power of multiplication that is in this partnership.
So do you want to move on to action items? There's more you want to go over on this, because I think that's a great place to say we've tied this all together.
We can end it there. People want more like excited Mike, really they can contact me directly.
I was like, I think we could just go on and on and on and on. So we need to draw a line here somewhere. So I'm looking at the action items that you have on here, Mike, or lack thereof. Start talking.
Well, Like I said, this is a subject that is near and dear to my heart. I literally wrote a book on this exact topic. So I feel like this is a great book, and the narrative that they share is awesome, and there's a lot of stuff that you can glean from it. It's also a lot of stuff that I've gotten revelation of through my own personal study. I would say, so I had trouble picking out an action item, but the one thing that I really do want to change now that I am looking at this, I want to do a better job with our budget. So my wife and I are going over this literally right now, and what we're recognizing is that we've kind of let it slide a little bit. And I know that that is something that we need to get on top of. I want to be able to go in there at any given moment and know exactly where everything went and where everything is going. So we've got a program that we're using to do that. And I guess that would be my action item, would be get the budget 100% up to date.
Yeah, I know my wife and I have been running a personal budget for a number of years now, and it's been incredibly enlightening and very helpful. So I can't say that that's a takeaway for me in my personal life, but I also know that I haven't really done that for my business. It's always operated as keep expenses as low as you can and drive as much of an income as you can. But I've never sat down and written a full-on budget for my business. It's easily in the black by a long shot since it's a web business. So there's very little for expenses in respect to what it drives as an income. So I don't really have to worry about that. But at the same time, I couldn't necessarily tell you that all the expenses that I have for that are the right ones. So I need to be more intentional about that. So that's going to be one of my takeaways here. The other is, and I wrote it as be okay with being aggressive in business. That might be a bad way to say it, but I want to make sure that I'm not being complacent with what I'm doing in my business and being okay with trying to help more people. And that's been kind of my drive with the Guild lately. And it's something I want to be better at. I want to be able to help more people. And in this way, and I say being aggressive, and again, I don't know that that's the right term for it, but I'd like to use my business to help more people. And that's what I'm shooting for.
Nice.
So, author style, rating, hit me, Mike.
Well, I definitely like the author's style. I really enjoyed the book. I thought it was very engaging. It was very interesting. There were a couple things that I had minor issues with, but overall, I really like the message of the book. I think it is very needed. Honestly, I have trouble rating this one because I think that there's a lot more here that you really have to understand in order for this stuff to really stick. So I think it's great as like a first step, but I also think that there's a lot more that you have to understand before you're really in Antonio's shoes where you're super successful. And I think that's not necessarily deceiving, but it's kind of lost in the translation. It's like, well, if you just understand these 12 things, then your life's going to be radically different. It kind of reminded me of those posts that you see, like one small hack to change your life in only 2 minutes a day, seemed a little sensational to me.
Just a little.
Yeah. And I know that this is colored because of my past and my own personal experience with this subject, my Bible college degree, and my own personal research that I literally did hours and hours and hours of on this exact topic. So I don't expect everybody to come from the same reference point. But I'm going to rate this at 4 stars.
Nice. I will agree with you on author style. Very easy read. And I do like that it's story form. Again, I mentioned early that the study guide on this was something that I did read, but there were some bits of it that I jumped over just because I felt like we'd already talked about it. And that kind of, I think if I was sitting down and I was going through this with a group, that would be a different story, because looking through some of the discussion questions, I could see how it would be very helpful in a group setting. So that's something that I know I could see as helpful. I also know that I would agree with you in that this is a great starting point for people. I can't say that this is going to, and even at the end of it, Antonio's talking to Julio, his grandson, and saying that he needs to meet. So he's going to meet someone back at the steps of St. Peter's in a year. So even that, he's talking about how you're going to be connecting with somebody else to learn more about this. So I think there is a level of it doesn't stop with the book, and I kind of wish that had been called out a little bit more, because if you just read this and think it's going to solve a lot of problems, it's not going to happen. I don't think any book is really going to do that. So there might be a bit of a misconception with that. For a rating, I think I would put it at 4.5 here, Mike. I'll up you one. I think this is one that I plan to and have already recommended to a handful of people who are struggling with some of their mindset when it comes to money and the church, and how do you work through some of the issues on those two, and how do they work together. So this is a case where I have a few friends and family members who are well off. I wouldn't say they're super wealthy, but they do all right for themselves, and they really struggle with their relationship with that and the church and how those two play together. So I've recommended it to them, and I think it's a great starting point for people in that position. That's why I put it there.
Yeah, I would agree with that. All right, so the next book then is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, which is my choice. One of those classic books that is referred to a lot that I'm kind of ashamed to admit that I haven't read yet.
You like to pick these.
Yeah.
I feel like I should have read this. Okay, now we'll do it publicly.
Online accountability.
There you go. There you go. Following that, I've selected The Art of Asking by Amanda Palmer, which should be an interesting read. It's all about being willing to put yourself out there and ask for things and get over the fear of doing that.
Nice. My Gap book is one that I ordered off of Amazon, and I always order the hardcover versions. Turned out that the hardcover version was actually not available through Amazon, but it was also available through an affiliate seller, and it still offered the Prime shipping. So I got it. It was fairly cheap. It was only like $5 or $6. And I got it, and turns out it's a signed copy. So that's super cool. And so my book is Do Over by John Acuff.
Nice. I'm a fan of Acuff. He writes some good stuff.
Yeah, he's a very entertaining author, very easy to read.
Yeah, I'm reading kind of I don't want to say textbook, but it's definitely a long, in-depth book. We'll see if I get through this one in a week. But
if you read a book which is by a person who writes textbooks, does that make it a textbook?
I don't know. That's a very good question, because
or if you read a book by someone who writes curriculum, I guess is it a textbook?
So this is by Charlotte Mason, Towards a Philosophy of Education. My wife and I are planning to homeschool our girls, and this is a book that was recommended to us by a longtime follower of mine, Matt, and I know that he homeschools his kids, and they have some very similar viewpoints to us, and I'm very interested in his take on this. They've been at it longer than us, and he highly recommended this as a place to get started in understanding how to homeschool in a very positive way. So I'm interested in this. Again, we'll see if I get through it in a week. It's, 250 plus pages long, and a fairly small type and long pages. So we'll see.
Good luck.
Thanks.
All right. And if you want to recommend a book, I know that Joe specifically has mentioned that he's going to be grabbing a bunch of recommendations, and I was looking through the list too. I'm definitely going to select a couple as well. So we would love to get your recommendations, and you can do that by going to bookworm.fm/list. And there'll be a button to recommend a book. You will also see a list of all the books that we have covered, as well as the books that are on the schedule, and also all of the books that are currently recommended.
Yeah, I'm planning to do that likely in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So get them out there. Get them out there now. So since this episode was very different, I'm very curious to see what people think of it. So there's a couple ways you can let us know if we're headed down a path that you absolutely hate or if you absolutely love this, because I have a feeling this is a polarizing episode. A couple ways you can do that. Leave us an iTunes review. So you go to the link in the show notes and you can get there that way. Or you can go to the Productivity Guild where we have our conversations about each episode. So you can do the feedback thing on one of those two places. And links to both of those will be in the show notes.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us. If you're reading along, the next book up is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, and we will talk to you next time.